My name's Peter Baird. I do some farm consulting and farming of my own. Also work with Nigel. We're here today talking to Nigel about the period over the last 5 years, particularly 18 and 19, that were terribly dry and had a massive impact on ground cover in a cropping and pastoral grazing sense.
Yeah, right. Nigel Baird, Coleraine Station. We're about 65 kilometres northwest of Wentworth on the Anna Branch. We're a mixed sort of enterprise, mainly consisting of merino sheep and some very dry land cropping, opportunistic even. The property is about 35,000 hectares. Our stocking numbers vary quite a bit. At the moment we've got about 6,000 head altogether on, which is about 4,000 breeding ewes. And we do anywhere between 3,000 to 4,000 acres of cropping. I'm not sure what normal is anymore, but I think traditionally we're about 8-inch rainfall, so we're under the bare elements. So yeah, it has been a bit of a below average events over the last sort of 5 years. How it's affected the place? Well, yeah, it got very dry. Obviously there was a lot of soil erosion, both in the cropping system and grazing. More so, I think, major damage in the cropping system due to grazing. And once again, crystal ball was fantastic, but we had to known what we know now, we would not have stocked through the grazing system so heavily and went to confinement feeding quicker.
The most severe event in that 18, 19, early 20 period that I've come across and spoken to a lot of farmers I've dealt with over a long period of time. So I'd say the most substantial, this side, if you spoke about this side of the river being New South Wales versus Victoria, the only significant difference between the two is probably the impact of vermin as a result of the drought, and kangaroos particularly coming from a long way north that created a management issue which was probably unprecedented and had a massive impact on top of grazing from livestock. So that was probably one big one in a cropping sense, and even a grazing sense where the vermin were that bad they were just pulverising any value of ground cover or stock feed left.
We had a lot of sheep on agistment, spread out from Narracourt, Balranald, Swan Hill, yeah, spread out everywhere, just because it was hard to get and it was such a dry period and such widespread. There wasn't that much feed anywhere, so trying to preserve the ground cover out in the grazing paddocks was simply destocking and a little bit of containment feeding closer to the house. Well, if we're ever going to crop it again, we have to do something. It's still borderline uncroppable.
I suppose if you're looking at small scale areas within paddocks, if it's just rises or say if it's flats that have gone, and you're not looking at full scale, things like double seeding at seeding time once you've got the confidence to do so. Nigel did a couple of areas on one paddock this year where the rises were severely blown out, but only smaller areas, sort of 10 to 20 acres, and that, even though the crop didn't make it far through, it did grow well enough and thick enough to hold. So that's probably one small scale. When it comes to small scale operation, when it comes to whole paddock scale, as a gut feel here, Nigel's probably got, there'll be 3 to 4 passes required to get it level with cultivation and beams or chains to try and drag dirt, just because of the substantial nature of how much it's shifted. I think moving forward, if people come across similar situations to what was 18 and 19, people may look at ridging up country in some respect to try and hold it, because if it's going to blow bare, you may as well be trying to do that. But obviously people like Nigel and others will be trying to avoid that happening. But yeah, I'd say that's something people will consider, because it is something that works. It feels like it's a risk factor, but if it's going to blow anyway, it must have some sort of ability to contain the soil on your property, because topsoil lost is, you can't return it.
Less stock throughout our cropping system. Yes, there are times when, like this year, we've got a failed crop. We need to get some return out of it. Yes, we've got it heavily stocked, but we'll be looking to pull them out as soon as any of the valuable feed's gone, the grain, and try to maintain as much stubble as we can. But at the end of the day, the soil makes us money. So if we're not looking after that, we're not looking after ourselves. So just trying to make these decisions earlier with what we've got.
Being able to have grain on hand to value add's critical, because bringing grain in or hay, let alone the cost and expense, the freight's a big killer given it's so far from anywhere. So if you can do it on your own farm, there's money to be made out of that in a sense for the value adding perspective.